Welcome, everybody. This is the Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley, and every week we bring you the stories of people around the world who are making life better for others, for improving communities, for finding ways to work together, to bring the kind of joy and meaning that comes from serving others. We in Rotary believe that that is a very good way to live your life. There are 1.2 million Rotarians around the world and about 36,000 clubs. We're one of them. The Rotary E-Club of Silicon Valley is an online and asynchronous model, a bit of an unusual one in that regard, but certainly a good one for people who need flexibility in terms of their service club experience. And so if you are curious about it, you can find out more at rotary.cool. One of the things we take a lot of pride in is the very cool speakers that we get telling us about the great things that are happening in their part of the world. And today we're going to be talking with Dika of Sungai Watch in Indonesia. She is the partnerships coordinator, and she has a wonderful story to tell about the things that they are doing to make the rivers all the more a piece of pride for Indonesia. And we are excited to have her. Dika, welcome to the Rotary E Club of Silicon Valley.
Thank you so much, Rushton, for a note. And hi, everyone. So pleased to be here. I believe we are quite far from you, perhaps. I do hope that you are familiar or at least have heard of our beautiful island, Bali. And yes, so here I'd love to share a bit more about our work here and how rivers and oceans are so connected because really, despite our distances, we do share the same sea and the same ocean. Great. So I'm gonna go ahead and start talking about our work. We understand that Indonesian rivers, they actually account for 80% of the plastic waste that enters the ocean. And this is also because there's always a source to where the trash comes from in the ocean, right? And there are many factors that we see when we look at that source of waste in riverines. And we are founded by three amazing siblings, Gary, Kelly, and Sam, who are French, but they grew up in Bali. And it was really such a beautiful initiative, very grassroots, very ground up, to, in essence, wanting to tackle the problem in its source. What we have observed so far in the past 5 years now, we see that in the first frame, you see there is open dumping or unregulated dumping that we see around areas where there are no access from the infrastructure, from the government for responsible waste management. So open dumping happens in an area that's not dedicated as a waste location, and then they would enter the river because of this. So the first is the Teba River in Denpasar. That's a bit central in the capital city of Bali. And then because of rain, because of the water flow, this trash actually flows down to a mangrove. This mangrove forest, it is of course crucial for the island, for the environment, and it also actually serves as a natural barrier before trash enters the ocean. And so the trash, the plastic waste actually gets stuck in the mangrove ecosystem here. And then with more rain, the trash then flows further down into the ocean, into the last frame, the Kedonganan beach in Kuta. And then it then gets carried back and washed up by the beach there. This is how we look at the correlation from rivers to the sea. And so when we look at this problem, we've devised very simple but scalable solutions. First is installing a trash barrier. What we call of a barrier is essentially a floating system. It's very simple but effective into a hotspot, a point in the river. So if you look closely, that rectangular object is actually a fridge. One full-size fridge was washed across and was caught in one of our barriers. This is in East Java. So what we do with the barrier is we regularly maintain the barrier and clean up the waste. And I'd love to explain more a bit in the later slides. And then in in collaboration with that initiative, we also do a public weekly cleanup to engage with volunteers, to engage with the public. And then we also do a third larger scale emergency cleanups for more bigger scale for tons and tons of waste. And then the fourth is education, with younger students, with children, but also with community members, because really learning knows no boundaries of age. And socialization is, of course, very important, because truly what we see here, it's not about communities and putting blame on actors or communities, but it's rather having more knowledge and education and finding out solutions together, and how we manage this waste responsibly. So here, what I'm showing you is our latest emergency cleanup. What happened just 2 weeks ago is a massive flood in Bali. This disaster is one of the biggest, most devastating in the last 30 years in Bali. What happened was 3 days of rain that caused massive floods. There are so many casualties, 18 to 20 lives lost, so many missing, thousands of Balinese displaced. And you see in this footage, among of these huge wooden logs from landslides, from the floods, you might also see personal assets that are actually not waste, but it's actually things that were washed away, right? So mattresses, again, fridges, and then stoves. These things are crucial for their daily life, and then they also got washed away. And why this is important is because if the clogs don't get removed, the floods will happen again. And right now we're only in September, entering October, and the monsoon season for rain is actually in November. So this is very crucial work. We are working around the clock to remove all the debris as much as possible, while hoping to also push for policy. So you'll see members of the army, the police, government instances, to hopefully resolve or improve the infrastructure in the city before the next rain hits. So here, I'm not sure if you can hear the slide, but here we have an overview of our achievements. We have engaged with 17,000 volunteers. We have 165 and counting full-time employees in Sungai Watch. We have collected over 3.6 million kilograms, so that's about 7 million pounds of non-organic waste. And then the third is our effort to add value in plastic waste to be able to make this process circular and as much as possible end to end. And so how we strive to make removal to be circular is first, of course, the collection across as many ecosystems as possible. So Sungai Watch, Sungai literally means river, but again, beyond the river, waste hotspots do cluster in many different ecosystems. So we try as much as possible to tackle them. And then the important work is it doesn't end in collection. We do sorting, we do brand audit, we separate it to different categories. Something as simple as one plastic bottle, it cannot be recycled just as one bottle. The cap itself, the body, the wrappings, these are 3 different materials, and that's just one bottle. So sorting into different categories, separating them is very important for auditing, for processing into a responsible off-taker for upcycling. And the last is, of course, what I mentioned, recycling it into beautiful design goods. We have a sister company called Sungai Design, in hopes that with the added value, we're able to, fund Sungai Design profits back to our Sungai Watch nonprofit. This is a time lapse of what happens during a trash barrier maintenance. We have a patrol team of 5 people, and they would regularly travel from spot to spot and enter the water and collect the waste, weigh it on the spot. You will see here there are massive amounts of styrofoam. This is one of the material that we still struggle to process. You will also see a bit of organic. So when we say organic, it's usually leaves, it's trees, etc. So we either collect it, or if it's small enough, we leave it in the water to go back to the environment. And then data is something that we really push forward: data, transparency, and accountability. For a river barrier, each sponsor would get a geotag documentation of that catch that you just saw earlier. So that catch is weighed directly right next or after the collection, and then we would track the ups and downs of this waste in kilograms. We track the amounts which actually increase and decreases with or in response with the environment. So for example, a point could be catching maybe 50 pounds a day, but during a heavy rain, it could go to maybe 1,000 or maybe 3,000 pounds each day, right? So this data tracking is very useful for us to understand the waste, and also to track the behavior change as well, because this is, again, together in line with our community efforts in socializing, in educating, and also in the public engagement of volunteering. And I would also love to highlight our newest program in North Bali. So North Bali really demands a different kind of cleanup. Here, you will see that if you look a bit deeper in the image, the land actually goes a bit steeper up. And you'll see that the trash is actually a little bit cascading down, right? So North Bali is, if you have come here before, maybe think Lovina Beach. So North Bali is 3 to 5 hours of a car ride from the Bali airport. It's further, it has lesser tourists, and oftentimes it also has lesser access to infrastructure and waste management. The heat there is also very strong. And the topography, the geography, what happens in North Bali is the riverbed is more shallow. So the waste would then build up around the river, not in the water, because first, the waterway is smaller. Second, the water rises so fast. Maybe in the morning, it would rise 3 to 5 meters up, and then by noon, it could drop again. So you'll see that the waste actually builds up around that riverbank, right? And then there is steep and uneven terrain. So in this situation, when we install a barrier, it doesn't work, because the barrier then doesn't catch it. It floats too fast up and down. So what happens here is actually our newest program, where our trained team enter the area and clean it up manually. And the reason why manual is important is because the steepness of the terrain, it doesn't allow equipments or machineries to be effective in these areas. So the human touch, the human agility is still very crucial here. And so for North Bali, again, the tracking is very important for us. Before the cleanup, after the cleanup, we take pictures with operations team. We feature the supporter, the sponsors' contribution. We strive to complete the cleanup within 3 months. And yes, we make sure that, there's always a photo documentation to ensure that there's transparency, the location and everything, so that wherever you are, you know exactly where your funding has gone to and what it has supported. And I think here, lastly, I want to share a bit more on where we're going, where we've been, and also where we're going, what's next, right? So in 2020, our first ever headquarters main office was built or made, because it was such a DIY period in 2020 during COVID period, in Denpasar. And then our first ever sorting facility in West Denpasar in Tabanan. Our second ever facility right at the heart of the mangrove forest. And then we expanded to multiple stations across Bali. And we made a beautiful achievement of entering Java. So what we're looking here is our movement towards the west side, right? Because in East Java, we're able to partner with amazing sponsors and open 3 new facilities. And this is actually important because recycling facilities, process facilities, they actually reside mostly in Java. And then our latest, newest station is actually in Sidoarjo. Sidoarjo is right next to, it's the outskirts of Surabaya. Surabaya is the second biggest city in Indonesia. And it is also where the factories are concentrated across Indonesia. It's mostly in Surabaya and Sidoarjo. So this is our newest station. And where we're heading next is moving westward to Jakarta, the capital city of Indonesia. And specifically Bekasi. Bekasi is it houses Indonesia's largest landfill. I think it's the size of 20 football fields. And so we are fundraising towards that expansion, and then ideally more towards Jakarta, and then again, of course, beyond that across Indonesia. And again, the work is endless and urgent, and the aim, the idea is to also expand and approach countries outside in Southeast Asia, our neighboring countries, because we see the same problems in growing regions, in Philippines, in Vietnam, in India. So that's where we're headed. And again, we're so grateful that we are trusted by so many industry leaders from the global brands, hospitality, green banking, F&B, service providers, local partners, collectives like Rotary clubs like yourselves. Everyone's support is so much appreciated. And yes, that is an overview of what we do. And I would like to, close it with the fact that, every river truly flows to the same sea that we share.
Wow, Dika, fantastic. Thanks. We're gonna get links to all of these things in our on our pages where these recordings live as well. So let's do, let's go ahead and have you stop sharing for a minute. I want to introduce the group that we have got. And from our club is me here in San Jose, California, and also honorary member of our club, Heather Edwards, in Oregon. We have visiting us Pat Baez Kelly here also in the San Francisco Bay Area. And Dika, we are excited. We're excited to talk to you about this. There's so many different places to start with the questions as well. But I want to start with what seems to be such a powerful piece of how Sungai works, which is the engagement of large sections of the community, having families go out, this kind of thing. Talk a little bit more about how that's been a strategy of Sungai Watch in order to be as effective as you are.
Sorry, Rush. I think I lost the last few seconds. Could you repeat the question?
Sure. Could you talk a little more about the different ways you're engaging the community in order to be more effective as a river cleaning effort?
Perfect. Thank you. So at first, I think, especially when we just started, there is a misconception that trash ends up in river because they're irresponsible individuals throwing it into the water, right? That's a very simplistic earlier approach or thought that we had. But of course, as time goes on, as we speak to more people, access and infrastructure, these two keywords are missing here because even before that, we have to think about education and culture understanding. So the invention of plastic is something that's actually pretty recent, right? Especially in Bali, when the community is so deep in their cultural indigeneity. And so everything that we did has always been organic before the invention of plastic. So generationally, the education of plastic waste management hasn't been shared widely. The second part is the lack of access and infrastructure. The simple fact that not every household or neighbor is accessible or being approached or taken care of by infrastructures that are meant to manage waste. And then actually what we see is that younger audiences are so much more receptive and they understand exactly not to do certain things, right? So in fact, what we see are the children reminding their parents that this is not the right way of managing your waste. And so the way we approach education, socialization is definitely through schools, all ages. We also go through different, we call it desa, or literally villages. It's collectives of housing complexes, and then usually they are led by two parties. one is the government head, and one is an indigenous head. And this is where Bali is unique because two part plays important roles. And so two parties, we speak with the leaders of these communities, and we ask them to activate their communities to at least maybe gather and discuss with us what are their thoughts, how can we change their minds, and how can we ask them to volunteer and join hands. That is the community level. We also look at it in corporation level, right? So we do our brand audits every year. We would indicate and find who are the corporate-based biggest polluters, which I think is part of Pat's question here. Danone, for example, consistently has been in a top 3 ranking. This is purely based on the types of waste that we collect and find in the rivers that we take care of, right? So pushing for corporates to be mindful in their production system, in the way they manage the product after selling and distribution. And then the third is, of course, government infrastructure policies. So being able to speak and be on the same table discussion with key governmental members for them to consider policy changes to allow for wider access to as many people as possible is something that we're also working for.
So fantastic. I feel like the attention to setting and history and cultural norms is something that represents an example to I think any service group that is looking to make a difference. Matter of fact, during the presentation, Heather commented in the chat that the cooperation is so beautiful, right? And so
Yeah.
this is clearly something that you're doing exceptionally well. Now, one of the things you mentioned along the way, almost in passing, is the Sungai design effort. And
Mhm.
I'd like to hear a little bit more about that, about how that has developed over time and the kinds of things that seem to be successful as a part of that.
Yes, of course. So Sungai Design is our founder's newest effort. It's very young, just I think 1 year old, or a bit shy from there. What the founders do is actually to um, with NGOs, I think funding is always a huge concern, or it's always something that we need consistently, right? And so perhaps we see NGOs offering merchandises and others, but we want to take a larger or a bigger step beyond that. And so we look at it in the lens of design. The plastics that we collect in the riverways, we process, wash, cut it, and then press it into beautiful chairs, furnitures, hospitality goods, trays, what have you. So you can go to www.sungaidesign.com to see all these products. And all these are made from plastics collected from rivers in Bali. That is kind of our unique selling point. And so the very minimalistic design kind of contradicts with how dirty the waste is, right, from the rivers. And so we have found great success in the design communities, their appreciation in the circular approach. And we're also seeing this growth of circular design approaches, not just in furnitures, right? So ideally, in this for-profit element, the profits of Sungai Design could then support Sungai Watch. And so in the utopian future, hopefully soon, is that the full Sungai Watch funding can be supported by Sungai Design sales, so that the funding consistency itself can come from Sungai Design.
Wonderful. I'll pass the mic over to Heather, who has a couple of questions as well.
Thank you, Rushton. Thank you, Dika, so much, not only for being here with us, but everything you're doing. It is overwhelming to think about climate change and all of the issues that we tackle, but organizations like yours, I think, keep people in the game, so to speak. You give people hope and you give people belief that we actually can make a difference. So, wow. My question is, how long have you folks been around? Because I see the slides you had earlier with that incredible number of international sponsors. Most of them I don't even recognize. A lot of them are international. And on your website, I see, and you did a really nice job with everyone's picture and title, 155 volunteers. How long have you been around that you've been able to get so many volunteers and so many sponsors? And congratulations on all that.
Thank you so much, Heather. It's so appreciated. So we have been around for I think 5 years now. Very very young compared to other NGOs. We were founded in 2020, so during the peak of COVID period. Where so we have three siblings. Gary being the first who immediately jumped into the river and just cleaned it up directly and asked for volunteers very organically. And so I can account to our success based on social media where when you look at, so Gary would be our first ever key opinion leader or influencer because with his now 1 million plus followers, he was able to document the ways that he sees in such an adventurous approach. And he, alongside Sam and Kelly, they're so not afraid to just get in the water, get into the heat of that waste hotspot, and get dirty together with all of our team. And so this approach really gained that early recognition and enabled us to kind of like fast track and attract that attention globally. I think 70 to 90% of our donors and partners are actually based in the US because we do have a 501c3 entity. And also because the language, the way we document our work from that direction, and as we expanded our Sungai Watch main Instagram account, we take a very documentary based approach. So because we know that Bali is beautiful, but not everyone is on the ground to document exactly what happens behind it. How do we push for policy? How do we talk to different communities? So with that kind of English-based, community-based documentary approach, we're able to build that audience and reach to more sponsors, supporters, and volunteers.
Wonderful. Now, another thing, you talked about having this utopian future of having the products generate their and may it happen. But you're also being very successful with your donors. And
Mhm.
this thing of having them be able to follow what their donation is accomplishing via the geotagged reports, the data tracking that you talked about, things like that. Is that something that you developed as a function of brainstorming in the organization, requests from the outside? Was there a model that you were following? Tell us a little bit about how that developed.
I can definitely say that it is a very ground up approach based on a pure desire of accountability and transparency. And so a lot of that framework and the approach is really based on how Sam, Gary, and Kelly have been on the ground and observing the workflow. How do we make it efficient operationally, financially, and welfare with manpower? And then with that, also, how do we report this in the best way possible to our supporters and donors, right? So, for example, it's really a step-by-step progress from like very simple Excel sheets, and then slowly we are more familiar with platforms like Airtable, etc. And these have been very focused in the weight of waste because that is the kind of parameter that's kind of easier to assimilate or best to be assimilated across all functions and all departments, right? But there's one crucial part that we are developing is not just the quantitative, the kilogram, the pounds, but also the qualitative part of it. It's also the behavioral change. It's also the perceptional change. It's the community opinions, their thoughts, what's the activities, because we're not alone in this work. There are so many different ground up grassroots community. They don't even speak English. They're just maybe just neighbors who are like interested or love to protect the rivers, right? So we work with these smaller communities as well to learn from them, but also give them guidance as well. At the same time, I think being able to slowly track behavioral, and I think we're brainstorming to find ways and how can we not just measure, but also report it in a way that's respectful and dignified to them. Because again, we see too many fingers oftentimes just saying that, it's the community that's at fault, etc. But It's really a mix of everything, right? So with the reporting, I think back to your question, Rushton, it is really truly the desire to be accountable for our friends who are so far from Bali, who may not even have been or may not be able to have the opportunity to come here. But as much as possible, we want to bring that information and what we see on the ground to you.
Well, I know everyone I know who's been to Bali says it's beyond beautiful. I mean, just incredible. So wonderful. We've talked a lot about Sungai Watch. Pardon me. I'd actually like you to take a few minutes and or moments and talk about you. How did you get involved in this? How were you prepared to be able to do the job you're doing as a part of the organization? And how do you imagine a future for helping other young people decide to be part of something like this?
Thank you. That's a very beautiful question. Thank you so much. So Sam, Gary, and Kelly, they are, I think, 29 years old. Sam is 29. Gary should be 31, and Kelly should be 33. And I am the same age of Sam. I am 28. My personal background, I am an Indonesian. I spent 10 years in Singapore for studying. And also, I worked in arts and culture. I was selling expensive things to rich people, roughly speaking, because I was in the fine arts, I was in museums and galleries, right? I was in corporations, in agencies as well. So I was dealing a lot with clients. And this is a very white collar work that I was doing. And I was also active on the social side because I see in Singapore being the hub, the meeting point of Southeast Asia. It's really the gate between Southeast Asia and the global north. But what is missing there is really the activism, the voice there. And so I felt like I needed to be somewhere that I'm more able to speak up about causes, humanitarian causes, social causes, any causes. And I found being in Bali being with Sungai Watch is a great match, so to say, the way the team approaches the environmental work here, because really environment work is intersectional. You cannot look at nature and not take account people inside there. We have so many people with different passions and drive, because for me, my biggest drive is communities of the least access, the lowest income. They would be the first ever to get the damage of a flood. They would be the ones that are most impacted when there's landslide, when there's heat, they don't have electricity. They are the first one ever where us who are more comfortable, we can maybe find a hotel, an Airbnb, right? So my personal drive is to contribute back to the people, because the people and the environment are so closely linked together. And being here in Sungai Watch, I think being able to provide the welfare, the protection to our team, being able to give them full-time benefits, insurance, free meals sometimes with beautiful donors that we have. This is something that really keeps me going. And I think for me, I would love for as many people as possible to realize that no matter what you do, whatever job or skill that you have, even if it's a very strictly to the laptop, because I can tell you, I don't enter the river as much as the rest, but there's always a skill that's needed in an environmental, in any NGO, in any social work that requires your white collar expertise. That's always going to be needed, and that change can happen in any level with any skill. And please always reach out to your community, your friends. There's always something that all of us can do.
Well, I think that's an amazing place to finish things up. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to wind it down before handing it back to you for the final word. But for all of you who have joined us for this recording, whether it's a video on our YouTube channel, the video embed on our Rotary.cool page with it that includes this, or one of our podcasts, you may well be hearing this as a part of your morning exercise walk or your commute. And we are thrilled to be able to share these kinds of stories and the inspiration that is a part of them. So thank you very much for your time. We hope that you will share this story with others. And if you want to learn more about Sungai Watch, you can also find links and more information on the page where you found this recording. And we hope you will take some time to look around that space as well. As we always like to do, we hand it back to our speaker for the final word. Dika, what would you like people to have clearly in mind as they finish up the recording?
I would love to emphasize again that every one of us has a role to play. It does not have to be a monetary donation. It also does not have to be a physical volunteering experience. Everybody has different abilities. Everybody could be less able to do certain things, and that is okay. There is always a role to play for everybody in, like what Rushton said, in raising awareness, in just simply discussing and asking questions and reading more. And even though what I've been sharing is mostly in Bali, Indonesia, I am sure that you would find resonance in what you see in your own environment. And so the simple act of questioning and also wondering and discussing with your friends, it is so powerful to find and brainstorm and create new solutions for our shared better future.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much. And thank you, everyone. We will see you next week.